when I'm streaming? This is a completely valid question, and I do answer it. And I do have a roadmap for the people who are interested in the description of this video. But I don't think that's what people are asking, honestly. What I think people are asking, most of the time when they ask me how to learn C++ and Vulkan, is how do I get really good at this? How do I get really skilled, and how do I become an expert? This is a total different question, and something I wish to tackle. This video is generally for newer programmers who aren't already very good at something. I'll try to explain my system, and what I use personally, to show how I'm trying to become an expert. I should be completely straight with you though. I honestly don't feel like I'm an expert. Even in my own system, I'm nowhere near done. And I'm always trying to get better. I honestly don't really feel that qualified to make this video, but I don't see anyone else making this in the programming space. So I hope it helps out people in my community at the very least. So I need to start with AI. Some of you may be thinking, why can't I just use AI to become an expert? It comes down to this. When you're starting out, you need to be a beginner, and AI is taking that away from you. You need to fail and struggle. You need to learn the basics and grow. Learning the basics deeply, which is all about learning how and why things work, is important for mastery. If you don't understand why something works, you haven't learnt anything. Please let yourself be a beginner. If you start yourself at the middle, you're going to be no use to anyone. Now AI, unfortunately, works, which is why people use it, especially for coding. It adds a ceiling and a floor to your coding ability. Most beginners, when they're starting out, realize if they ask the AI questions about programming, they can get the answer and solve the problem that they're working on very easily. Right now, it can actually do some interesting things. But I talk about this in my community. This is a trap, especially if you're a beginner. The reason being, it adds a hard ceiling to your skill, which is the reason why I don't use it. So, why don't I use AI? From what I understood from this study, there are two bad things that happen when you're using AI, even if you're already skilled. LLMs reduce cognitive function when you're engaging with a task. In this study, researchers asked people to write essays. There were three groups, one that could use ChatGPT, one that couldn't use anything, and one that could use internet search. When the ChatGPT group switched with the group that couldn't use anything, the ChatGPT group couldn't quote back anything they had written in their essay, even though they were no longer using ChatGPT. This is because of cognitive offloading. AI allows you to stop thinking effectively. This study also showed that the ChatGPT group used more homogeneous and less varied language than the other group that didn't use ChatGPT. So what does that mean for programmers? Well, the study suggests that, for programmers, the first thing is that all your solutions will start to become more homogeneous. And it's very possible that you'll start to forget code more easily when relying heavily on AI, just like the ChatGPT group when it came to their essays. This is a classic example, but when I asked ChatGPT to write Quicksort, which is a solved problem in programming, and it's something that anyone can memorize to use in their own code, ChatGPT gives the worst version of Quicksort by selecting the highest array value as a pivot point rather than a random value or the median between 3 points. It suggests that you can do this at the bottom of the prompt, but this isn't good enough. Now you could say that this Quicksort implementation is fine. It works, it does its job, and does what it needs to do. But when it comes to game engine development or graphics programming, it's good enough it doesn't cut it, because your code needs to be extremely fast. And studies like the one I mentioned earlier shows that the chances of the programmer actually knowing how to fix this go down. With heavy reliance on AI, it's less likely that the person is actually going to remember what they even wrote. This, of course, is a solved problem like I mentioned earlier. This is only going to get worse with more novel problems. I really hope you haven't missed the point here by thinking that I should have used a better AI or some kind of AI agent, because this thing is always going to happen, no matter the tools that you use. And I assume that people who are interested in programming Vulkan or C++, or some kind of game engine and graphics, want to write their code themselves. Now, wouldn't it be nice if you could sit there and write the code without any assistance with AI? That's the benefit of building expertise. You can only do this if you let yourself be a beginner. Leave AI alone, despite what other people tell you to do, and you'll be able to build that expertise in the long run, becoming a better programmer. Why did I bring up AI? Well, like I said, I always get this question about how to learn C++ or Vulkan. I think what people are really asking is how do I become a great programmer to either make a game or make money? So because I keep getting this type of question, I asked my friend, who I've worked with for a number of years professionally. He's an extremely good programmer in my opinion. He's very fast at writing high quality code. So I asked him the basic question of how do you learn C++? This is what he said. I find this question really hard. C++ apparently is one of the hardest languages to learn. But when I learned it in 1997, I'd learned BBC Basic, 32-bit ARM assembly, and C before that. I essentially learned C++ from the Visual C++ 5 manual, mostly to learn the differences between C and C++, and using library books. There was plenty I got wrong. The C++ compilers weren't very standard compliant back in those days, so there were other hurdles to get over. So I learned C++ from the bits and the bytes upwards, and I think having that low-level view has paid off. If you want to learn to write C++ well, I'd say take your time. Learn C first, with a half eye on low-level stuff, like memory, addresses, bits, bytes, I/O. Then I'd look into the shiny and helpful things that C++ builds on top of that. If you wanted to learn C++ quickly, I'd say don't bother. You could perhaps learn C# or Java quickly, and move down a level to C++ after that. But I don't know how that would work. I'd suggest watching some of the crash course videos on computer science, parts 3 to 14, as a grounding. I'll provide that and his GitHub below. If you're interested in emulators, he has a great project working on an Acorn Archimedes RISC PC emulator and a hobby operating system. To reflect back on what my friend said, if you want to learn C++ quickly, I'd perhaps say don't bother. This is what this video is about. You're not going to master these concepts quickly, and to circle this back to AI usage, you are being told all the time. You don't have to take a long time to learn these difficult things. There's always a quick solution, a hack, a cheat that you could use. If you want to learn it quickly, don't bother. This also applies to some online resources and books too. This idea is everywhere. There's this fantastic article that also reiterates this point. Teach yourself programming in 10 years. This was written as a reaction to books that were coming out at the time that were titled something like Teach Yourself This Language in 24 Hours. It talks about how true expertise takes 10 years to develop, by citing some studies. So what's the rush? Let yourself be a beginner. You're going to have to build experience no matter what you do, if you want to learn to code well. To reflect a little bit on my own learning experience, I have bought all these books to study. I have some yet to finish, and I have read some of them completely. I go over these again and again and again in my notes to try and get better as a programmer. This is all very important to keep in mind when you're writing a game from scratch using 3D graphics that has some kind of interesting gameplay to go with it.